Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified when new videos are released. This block is called Star Bright. It's 12-inch finished. It is two colors. It's just the background white and the accent fabric. In this case, it's red. There's a lot going on here, and we have half square triangles in the corners, and we have squares on point in the sides. Here is what it looks like if you set them block to block. Down here I have, if you want to make different size quilts, here's a different size, the number of blocks, the setting, how much fabric you need of the background, and if you were using fat quarters, how much you would need. And in this case, one fat quarter is enough accent fabric for 2 blocks if you wanted to make a larger quilt. So let's look at the patches. Our first patch A is half square triangles, 2-inch finished. Now there's a lot of triangles in here, and then a lot of patches that are just triangles. We'll cut 2 7/8 inch squares, cut the squares in half diagonally once, and you'll have 2 patches. Now you'll need 32 patches for the background fabric and 16 patches for the accent fabric. Here are the AccuQuilt dies that will cut this size. So now let's look at this. You have many choices in how to piece these. If you want to do half square triangles 2 at a time, we have in the corners here 4 sets of triangles, and there are a total of 16 half square triangles. You could cut 2 squares to make your half square triangles 8 at a time. There's a link right here in the video that shows you how to make these 8 at a time. If you want to do that, you cut the squares 6 inches. Then you'll trim them down to 2.5 inches when you're finished. If you're doing AccuQuilt, you'll cut patches. So you will cut the 32 patches of the background and the 16 patches of the red fabric. But what I'm going to do, I use the AccuQuilt, so I cut patches, and I'm going to just stitch them, just chain stitch them all and make them all at once. Patch B is a 4-inch finished square. We'll cut 4.5 inch square. We just need 1 for the background. That is in the center here. Here is the AccuQuilt dies that will cut that shape. And patch C is a 4-inch finished square on point. Now we have 4 of these here on the sides. And this is the red, their accent fabric for that. The half square triangles that go around the square on point are up here in patch A. So when we put this together, we're going to do the half square triangle, and then we'll do the square on point. Then we'll put the block together. Here are my fabrics. This is patch A, the half square triangles, and this is for the center, the square, and these are for the square on point. What you can do, instead of doing the half square triangles first, we can pull out our 16 background half square triangles, and we're going to piece them like this. I will have a short video that shows how to piece these. So we'll take out our 16 background half square triangles and then our 4 squares and make 4 of these squares on point. And then we'll take what's left of the half square triangles, and I'm going to just chain piece these and make our half square triangles. Piecing the square on point unit using rotary cutting patches. You have your 4 half square triangles that go on the corners and your large square in the center that's set on point. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first, and what I do is flip this over, center the square on the triangle, matching these edges, the long edge of the triangle and one side of the square. You want to see if these triangles over here on the right and here on the left are roughly the same size. You just kind of eyeball it. So there, I'm going to go with that. Stitch 1/4 inch from this edge, a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Do this side as well. Press your seams open, and if you look, these edges extend here, and what I'm going to do now is just trim these off straight in line with the side of the square. Put your half square triangle down with the right side facing up, and then place this in the center, and then check the size of your triangles overhanging here. And what you're going to do here, you will start stitching right here in this V section where this point meets. And this should be 1/4 inch from here to the edge of this fabric. Start here, stitch 1/4 inch all the way to this side, and you should come out here at the same part on this side. And do that on both sides. And here's what the stitching looks like. And now you're going to press your seams open. And here's the finished unit. Now just trim off these little nubs on the sides. And your unit's finished. Piecing the square on point using AccuQuilt. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first. And you're going to place the half square triangle piece on top. We need to center it. I just kind of eyeball it, and I'm looking at this little triangle of the bottom fabric poking out here. You can barely see it. It's a little triangle poking out here, and then on the other side there's a little triangle poking out here. What you want to do is try to get them as close to the same size as possible. So I'm just kind of shifting it a little bit. And you're going to take it to your machine, and your 1/4 inch should be right here at this point. So you stitch from this point 1/4 inch all the way down, and you come off at this point. And it's more important that you have the 1/4 inch than if you're exactly on the point. And you'll do that for both sides, this side and then this opposite side. Press your seams open. Now we'll flip it over and do the other two sides. You take your triangle, and now you have sides that you can match. You see the triangle has the points cut off. These points are going to line up with what we just sewed. So if you look here, you see they line up with this edge, these two edges, here, here, and across the top. Now you'll stitch 1/4 inch from that point here all the way down to this other point, and do that to both sides. It's really difficult to see this stitching because I used white thread, but you can see it coming out here, this little tag here, and over here. If these don't match perfectly, if it's like it's not long enough, don't stretch this triangle because you'll just make the unit wonky. Just center it as much as you can and stitch 1/4 inch. Now we'll just press it open and it will be finished. And there's your finished unit. At some point when you finish your square on point unit, you'll have to sew something else to it. And you want to keep these points nice and sharp. And sometimes you might be matching it to a seam line or a plain piece of fabric or maybe another point. And I'm going to show you how to keep these points nice. If you've pressed your seam open, you will see where these three fabrics intersect and form a point right here. That's your point on the back, and it's also your point on the front. So you can stitch with this part on top, and you'll be able to make sure that your point stays there. I take a pin and put it right there at the point, and then pick it up on this back side. And in this case, I'm going to come down about 1/4 inch and then put that right in the seam line. That way the point will end up right on the seam line. Put your fabric pieces together and line up the top edges or the edges that you need to line up. And make sure your pin is perpendicular, goes straight down into the fabric, like that. If you're at an angle like this, your points won't match. So make sure they're straight, perpendicular to the fabric, and then put it into the fabric. When you start sewing, line up these edges here. Start at your 1/4 inch and sew all the way down, and you're going to aim for this point where that pin goes into the fabric, and you'll know that you're matching the point and the seam line on the back. And straighten your bottom edge again and continue stitching 1/4 inch off. And here's what the stitching looks like if you can barely see it on here with this thread. It goes right across here, leaving the point open. You're not stitching over the point. And then if I flip it over, you'll see it's not exactly 1/4 of an inch there, but that doesn't matter because what you want is the point to match the seam allowance here. Now just press the seam open and you're finished. The squares on point are finished and they're all pressed, seams open, and all the half square triangles are finished. Now we're going to sew the half square triangles into pairs and then sew them into a 4-patch unit like this. They'll all be facing the same way. And then once we do that, we're going to put the block together. Now I've pieced all these 4 corner units and they're all sitting the same way. If you watched the little segment about doing the square on point, toward the end of that, I talked about using a pin to keep these points nice and straight. And you'll want to do that method with these half square triangle blocks because these 4 points all meet here. And it'll be easy to do if you just use the same method that was demonstrated in the square on point demo. Now we're just going to get the Prop-It board out and put this block together. We'll start with the center, and these go in the corner. Now these will be rotated because they're going to sit different ways. So this will be like this, and this will be like this. So there's always the white point is out on the outside edge of the block. And then we just put our square on point in the sides. Sew the top units together, the middle units together, and the bottom units together. Then sew the rows together and the block will be finished. Here's the block. I wanted to show you some of these. There's a lot of points to match here. Here's one here, and here, up here, everywhere you look. You want to have pretty points. Some are not as pretty as others, but most of them are pretty. So use that technique with the pin and your points will be pretty. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified when new videos are released.